I am Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska and the Gallup offices in Singapore. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, Southeast Asia edition, recorded on March 9th, 2014. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the program, we do have a live chat room available right below the video over at coaching.gallup.com/live. Or if you're listening to the recorded version, email those to us after the show. Just send those to coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just Gallup Strengths Center, all one word.com, for all your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video and both now live streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows over at coaching.gallup.com. Saurav Atri is our host today. Saurav works as a director of talent sourcing with Gallup in our Singapore office. And Saurav, it is great to see you today, and welcome to another edition of Call to Coach.
Thank you, Jim, and it's good to be back here. And today is a really exciting day. We're fortunate and privileged to have Dr. Ehssan Abdallah join in. Ehssan is a senior practice consultant at Gallup, and like I said, he truly is a global consultant at Gallup, servicing clients across the Middle East, Europe, and Asia Pacific regions. Ehssan, he just comes across, from back-to-back sessions. He just led up public courses in Australia in the last week of February, and just last week in Singapore. His expertise lies in strategic planning and change, risk and performance management. He's been involved in more than 100 public and private sector projects throughout his career with clients ranging from Fortune 500 organizations to family-owned businesses, and also multilateral bodies like the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. He works closely with executives and leadership teams to transform the companies into high-performing, sustainable organizations. What's great to have him today speak up is just his diverse experience across many industries, including telecommunications, technology, hospitality, energy, health, education, automotive, banking, and financial services, and just the global range of experience that he has working with so many different cultures. He is a frequent presenter at industry forums worldwide and contributes to various business journals. He's originally from Melbourne, and that's where he's joining in live from. And he has earned his undergraduate degree in economics and international studies, and his doctorate in international trade from Deakin University in Melbourne. Ehssan, thank you so much for joining in today. We love to hear from your experience, and your strengths journey, and the way you literally coach senior executives across different parts of the world. So, welcome to the session, Call to Coach today.
Thank you, Saurav. Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here with coaches and aspiring coaches the world over.
Great. So if you could maybe share, start your strengths journey, sharing your top 5, and how did you embark on the strengths-based development philosophy?
Well, to begin with, my top 5 are strategic, individualization, achiever, learner, and analytical. And pretty much the way this whole journey for me began was upon being hired by Gallup to work in their Dubai office. There was a real shortage of strengths-based development in that region with clients, but also in general with a lot of non-client organizations as well. A lot of their sense of development was really about, as it is in the rest of the world, it's about fixing things. It's about improving through fixing. And once we had begun that program, having been certified in London myself very early on in my Gallup career, got to really understand and to learn a lot more about the shortages of the developmental requirements in the Middle East especially, but also in Europe. And the fact that whenever you did have some, it was always about remedial intervention rather than just focusing on where your quick wins are, where your higher levels of return are going to come from, either individually but also collectively. So it really began from a pressing need locally in the Middle East, but obviously that was something which wasn't uncommon in other parts of the world as well.
Great. And since you've worked across regions, what sort of interventions do you see work best working with leaders in Europe versus leaders in Middle East, with Asia in general?
Interesting, very interesting question. And just through my strategic and my individualization, my 1 and 2 themes, very quickly, along with my analytical, very quickly I was able to draw patterns of similarity, of differences when it comes to the way in which organizations tackle strengths, individuals tackle strengths. And I came to the conclusion quite early on, having been exposed to strengths-based development across a big part of the world, that it's not that different. It's not that different. And it all comes down to sort of the way in which society, which mankind is about the repair, rather than that, you know, they're more concerned about putting someone in hospital who's got a broken leg, rather than developing their teams to become athletes preparing for World Championships. And that was the case in many organizations. It didn't really matter if they were in the Middle East, if they were in Dubai, or if they were in Hong Kong, or if they were in London. It was the case all over. In terms of what's worked and what's been most effective, and this is a conversation we had with our last group in Singapore, we find that with any change management initiative, as structural or as strategic as it may be across an organization, that your quickest form of change, what I've seen, is going to come from coaching. So you may put things that are highly intervention-based, where there's classroom programs, there's on-the-job learning, there's ongoing training and development through group sessions, etc., project-based work assignments. But I find that a 45-minute coaching discussion, or even a 60-minute coaching discussion with whether it's a frontline manager or a senior executive, I think the return on that, or at least the aha that comes from that, and the outcomes of that, you'll find have a lot stronger return in terms of movement than any other elements which are tied to a change program. So that's one thing that was really observable the world over for me, in terms of what a coaching discussion can yield versus maybe an ongoing work-based assignment or a workshop that may be delivered to a group of people.
Great. Any particular example that pops up in your head which kind of you saw, an aha moment come across during an intervention or just a coaching conversation?
The one that always, there's been a few, but the one that really sticks in my mind was we were working with a hospital executive, and this was a very well-regarded hospital CEO who's worked in some of the best hospitals in the world and some of the most prestigious health networks across the world. And when he had moved to Dubai, he was brought over to really help a local health provider, a private health provider, to up the game for their hospital. And what had happened was the demographics in Dubai are quite different from what he'd been used to, in terms of that expatriate labor was about 80 to 85% of the hospital staff there. And this guy had been around the block, he'd seen a lot, he'd been involved with a lot, and he'd worked in the developing world, he'd worked all over. Also in North America and Europe. But one of the biggest challenges that he had was, how does he really drive his mandate and some of the best practices that he's seen around the world in a way which suits local conditions? And time again, his bottlenecks were really around getting his executive team on board, but also getting his second level to really drive that across the hospital. This group had 2 hospitals in the United Arab Emirates. And through just wasn't a huge program or anything that we did in particular. It was just some coaching that we had with this gentleman around strengths and around what strengths-based, not so much development, but strengths-based discussions for him, and how they were used to really just cater for these differences that existed, but also to help him manage his own perceptions of what he had towards certain individuals, also nationalities, also certain parts of the hospital value chain, which is quite complex. You've got a lot of people that are working in the healthcare domain who may not have had the most strong healthcare experiences. So even though they bring project management expertise or they bring health information system expertise, they weren't day-to-day hospital practitioners. And so having strengths-based discussions and a coaching agenda that we set up with him, we're able to see some real developments, real breakthroughs in terms of how he got his message across, how he got his vision across, and how he was able to deal with a lot of the different complexities that were a part of his day-to-day life to begin with.
Great. Any tip that you have that you use, which is really effective during a one-on-one coaching conversation with a senior executive?
A tip in terms of a tip for the coaches listening in, or a tip for something that emerged from those discussions?
Something that emerges from that discussion, how you maybe go into a conversation, maybe the preparation that you go in, or just how do you lead to that discovery with that senior executive?
Yeah, like I had the advantage of having worked in the healthcare sector before when we began this engagement. But I think that whatever healthcare or whatever environment that you move into, whatever industry that you move into, or any level of an organization that you are involved with, and this may be for the first time, preparation is a must-have. It's very, very important for you to have done your homework, to have gotten as much information, not just gleaned from the Strengths Finder report, but also from other forms of, whether it's about the organization, whether it's its particular role or particular industry, or even just some qualitative information that you may have had a client undergo. Having said that, I think it's doubly important that once you begin the first coaching discussion with your client, to be able to and willing to let that go, and to really just be agile enough to move around with what a client's needs are, but also what some of those unspoken needs are discussed and come to the fore. And why this is important is because when you do engage in a coaching discussion, there's going to be things which are being experienced but are yet to be articulated that will be an outcome of your discussion. So this is not just a discovery for you in terms of your need to be agile, but for the first time in many cases, your clients are going to be articulating this and actually painting a picture which for them was never really a picture. At best, it may have been abstract. So just being willing to let go and being willing to be able to move around and to just be confident, but also humble enough to deal with the emergence of what might come.
Great. And does it differ from when you're coaching senior executives versus managers or frontline executives?
The differences really come out, not so much in terms of what you're looking for, but I think the differences come out in sometimes, generally you'll find executives, and again, depending on their strengths profile and how they're wired, you'll find that they can be a little bit more guarded because in many cases the spotlight is on them. They've got a massive amount of responsibility and they are not comfortable in appearing infallible when it comes to delivery, when it comes to performance. At the same time, having said that, sometimes you've got frontline people who or mid-level managers who are okay with this change, but have maybe never had a coaching discussion before in their lives. So it really, a lot of differences will come out, not so much depending on where they're from or what levels in the organization they are, but needless to say that a lot of the work that you do with executives is much more complex because a lot more is out of their hands in terms of the actual delivery of a particular project, a particular initiative, or a budget, let's say, for argument's sake.
Perfect. Also, we have a lot of aspiring coaches and already experienced coaches who are locked in live. Any advice that you have, you've been a strengths expert for so many years, any advice that you have for them that how can they develop themselves as coaches or just their coaching knowledge on strength-based development philosophy?
That's a very, very good question, Saurav, and a lot of the post-accelerated strengths program coaching one-on-ones that I've been involved with, a lot of the questions are geared towards that in terms of how do I do this, how do I set my business up, what do I focus on, what do I not focus on. So I think the key takeaway here is, and just some of the startup experiences that I've had around the world, I think that as a coach, if you can find your niche in terms of your industry, also in terms of what are you coaching, what's your strengths-based coaching going to be involved with, if you can anchor that, let's say it may be business process mapping, it may be the hospitality industry, it may be one particular area of specialization, I think that that's when you start seeing very, very robust outcomes as a result of your coaching interventions and what you do around that. Again, you obviously don't want to push away any opportunities to build your business and to build your brand as a coach, but I think that if you can start developing a niche and tie, and again, not discounting your experiences. You've got a lot of the coaches that we've been involved with over the past year and a bit. They come with a lot of experience, a lot of industry experience, technical experience. This doesn't take a back seat. This needs to work in parallel with strengths-based development and strengths-based coaching. And I think that this is something which really needs to be highlighted and illustrated and just built upon through strengths-based coaching.
And you've been leading public courses, public strengths courses across different parts of the world. How do you see coaches with different cultural backgrounds kind of adapt to their coaching needs and their expertise in coaches?
I think the first part, and this is where strengths, as we had with that example with that hospital CEO, strengths really provide an organization, not just individuals but leaders, but organizations with a real common language, and a real common language which has a denominator across all cultures. When I say cultures, I mean national, ethnic, social, but I also mean organizational cultures. So when you talk about strengths-based development, when you talk about, this is also something which is very much tied to organizational culture. So I think that, just as a tip for coaches who are going to be working around in very diverse places, such as Singapore, even Australia, the whole world now is such a integrated melting pot. There's no monoculture that exists anymore. I think that as a coach, given if you're focusing on strengths, you've got the upper hand. The reason why you've got an upper hand is that you've got a platform that helps expedite communication. It expedites the way in which we understand each other or seek to understand each other. It also helps provide levels of explanation in terms of the way people operate, behave, think, and feel. So focusing on this rather than on just the individual. For instance, we may say, the Irish are X, or the Germans are Y, or the Indians are A. I think this gives you an advantage and gives you that really sophisticated insight in terms of what are the factors that drive people through their strengths.
Great. Jim, do you have any questions from the chat that have come across?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with one of those. So Ranjananth, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asked this question: how does one who does not have experience being a C-level coach become a C-level coach? Are there any tips? If you haven't done that before, how do you break into that, or any tips and advice on doing that when you haven't done it before?
Very, very good question. And this comes up obviously with organizations that we work with, tied to coaching upwards as well. I think there's some parity there with that question. It really depends. Obviously, it's almost like getting your flight time up as a pilot. You can't jump onto a huge jumbo jet if you haven't taken some of the more smaller aircraft, prop-winged aircraft, and become quite well versed in that. So I think the quickest way to do this, and the most effective way to do this, is to think about how quick and how much comfort you can have with strengths-based coaching on a more sort of mid-tier or upper middle tier level. That will help you obviously gain confidence around the techniques to be used in a strengths-based discussion. And I think the outcomes when you are focusing on mid to upper tier clients are going to be a lot quicker than if you're dealing with a CXO. Once you've seen those outcomes, you're naturally going to be a lot more comfortable dealing with executives, because you've got runs on the board. You know how you've been able to suggest initiatives around change, but also how to develop them jointly with your clients. That joint piece becomes very important with executives, because with executives, you can never just throw an idea out there without it having some solid grounding. And to do this, 99 times out of 100 has to be done in tandem and in a very, very joint way with your CXOs or even your senior people in an organization. So the more runs you can get on the board with managers and with senior managers, the more comfortable you're going to be around what it requires to help a C-suiter develop and evolve. Having said that, sometimes you are thrown into the deep end, and I think that's when you've almost got to really, really put aside any perceptions that you have and to play it really safe around some of the things that you may say or some of the techniques that you may want to adopt, because I think the likelihood of them coming off without having effective outcomes to show for this can be a little risky.
Any specific examples you'd want to bring out in that from maybe your experience, especially being able to work your way up where you've seen that work really well?
In terms of coaching,
coaching up. In other words, coaching at the manager and then maybe making that jump to the C level.
Yeah, I think, look, we've had the opportunity to coach upwards within an organization and to see the differences. And I think one of the advantages that you have with that is that you can provide certain patterns and certain insights that may be operating and in existence across parts of an organization if you've got other metrics, other data points that you're working with. I think with an executive, the more information that you have about an organization, and preferably if it's quantitative as well as qualitative in an organization, I think that in many respects, if you can help figure out a way or come up with a plan in terms of how you may fuse that within a coaching discussion, you have a huge advantage. And the reason being is that sometimes an executive, I should say, is a little bit too close to their organization. They may look at things from a a non. They may look at things from a partisan perspective rather than non-partisan. So as a coach, if you can help open these windows that we call, so to speak, and just shed some insight as to what the consequences of these are, for better or for worse, I think that you will have an ability to provide pretty robust added value for your executives that you're working with. On a different side, if you're working with managers, I think that the gains, as they are much quicker, you can really push your limits a little bit more progressively. Again, though, with executives focusing on something which for them they may not be seeing, even though it's just around the corner, is going to be quite helpful. We've done work with a telco. I'll give you an example of a telco that we've worked with. We were able to work with a whole band of VPs with this telco. It's a Middle Eastern-based telco. At the same time, we had the opportunity to work with their executives, and in many cases, we found that their points of pain were really down to the fact that they had competing interests at the executive level. And so one of the suggestions that we came up with for them was to think about how they have shared goals and much more integrated elements of a balanced scorecard, just so they're not in conflict or at loggerheads at the top, which may not be that common, but really it was manifesting itself further down the organization, which they weren't aware to the degree that this was taking place.
We got a question via email as well, and this kind of changes gears a little bit, but VK Sharma asked this question. He says, can you change a person who is risk adverse through coaching?
Very good question. You shouldn't be looking to change someone who's risk averse. What you can do is obviously provide some insights in terms of what behaviors which may be considered or perceived as being risk averse, how they affect A, that individual, but B, also the way in which that risk is potentially managed, because as we know, risk can be positive, it's not just negative. And how is this coming across to the people around that individual? So I think that the message is you shouldn't be wanting to change that person, but really changing the way in which and what are the reasons why he or she seeks to be risk averse. And sometimes if you are overly risk averse, you may miss out on a positive risk. So thinking about not just your insights as an individual, but what are some other perspectives towards that risk, or the way in which you forecast the risk, how can you start integrating that so you're just opening up your blinkers a little bit further than you should, wider I should say.
So, and then let me change up the question on you one more time, because you came off two of our accelerated training programs, 2 different countries. You worked those consecutive weeks. We often, when I do the interviews with our coaches, so at the end of the training, we do these testimonials, and we post those to the Gallup Strength Center YouTube page if anybody wants to go out and take a look at those. But one of the questions I ask them a lot is any aha moments during the training, and let me turn that on you, because you get to see all these coaches go through this accelerated training and have these aha moments. If there was someone out there who was considering taking our accelerated training course, maybe a specific example of an aha moment that either you had or you watched a coach have during that training that really that just really made the point of why folks should be in that training.
Yeah, very good question. I didn't realize I was going to be put on the spot like this. But
Sorry about that.
That's okay, perfectly fine. Well, I think one of the biggest aha moments is, one in particular. There have been a few cases of this, but one in particular which had strong resonance with me was that we were in Sydney 2 weeks ago, and there was a very, very senior coach, very experienced coach, who'd been certified on a variety of different tools, and this was just another one that they're going to integrate into their suite. And she, for the first time, acknowledged what were the reasons why she could never consistently take her clients to successful outcomes. And it wasn't until we discussed with our name it, claim it, aim it paradigm that we actually discussed the aiming piece, and to really help a coach integrate the performance element to their repertoire, that a lot of her ideas, a lot of her thoughts, a lot of her feelings, a lot of the energy that she would generate with her clients, it didn't always stick. And so it was until that we took her through that, and obviously she was thinking about what her 34 things were, specifically her top 5, that she realized that those edgier themes obviously were an inhibitor for her, but also the fact that she'd never worked with a set of tools that helped her provide that performance piece into her coaching discussions. When the penny dropped for her, she was almost running out of the bathtub yelling "Eureka!" And that was something for me which was pretty profound, because she'd been coaching for a long time. And when it dawned on her, I think she was almost in tears and had to sort of gather herself for that part of the activity. So that was something for me which really made strong waves internally.
We see that all the time here at Gallup, a lot of these aha moments, and I never want to minimize them. They are amazing when people have these breakthroughs. Even like you say, as coaches, they've been coaching for a very long time, and they have these amazing breakthroughs. Roy in chat, I got one more question for you. Roy in chat, and I'm trying to tease out his question a little bit. So let me work through the dialogue a bit. As he asked, how do you relate strengths with the problems in a more contextual manner with the client? An example would be great. And so I asked him to expand on that a little bit. And he said, in the case of high turnover in a particular company, how do CEOs or managers use their strengths to solve this problem, or in a company where the people have very low engagement?
So, how much time do we have?
We've got a few more minutes. You can expand on that. So.
I think it's a very, very important question. It's a question which many leaders across organizations the world over are contending with. How does their leadership come across? And I think it comes back to the other question around performance. How does my leadership style come across, and how are others viewing that? Is it engaging them? Is it disconnecting them? Are they abandoning ship? I think that as a leader with a particular profile, it's very hard when we're talking about turnover and loyalty. It's very hard for one leader to directly influence this and contain this. But I think that the closer, and what we've seen around the world, is the closer that leaders can become to their strengths and what they do best and their natural talents, the more likely they are to come across as being authentic. So that's the first piece of the puzzle. The more authentic they are, the more likely they are to build loyalty, to build camaraderie and solidarity in terms of what they see, but also in terms of what they stand for. Now, the other part is, as a leader, how are your strengths potentially inhibiting the way in which you look at your team or you look at the rest of the organization? So, for instance, if you're driven by your belief system, and if you're driven by being a workaholic, maybe through your achiever and having a very, very strong work ethic, more so than your relationships, let's say, then how is that coming across to your team? So how is that going to across to the rest of your organization? That's one way in which you can almost delve into not just a leader's style of dealing with turnover or dealing with other performance issues, but it's also in terms of what's that mirror, what's the other perspective towards that leader. I may have very strong relationship need, but if I'm being driven by my leader to just burn the midnight oil and continuously work at any cost, even at the cost of my other motivational drivers, and then that's not going to wash up very well on me. So that's going to disengage me. So it's very, very important for leaders to think about what their style is, but also in terms of how that's perceived by others. And as I said earlier on, I think that's one way in which strengths can help accelerate that level of mutuality and understanding across teams and across organizations. It's harder when you're looking at it from a leadership perspective to impact across the organization, but I think if there's enough inertia, bottom up and top down, especially with managers, then your likelihood of mitigating the risks of turnover is much stronger.
So it's not just from a coaching perspective, your own coaching style, which strengths are your your favorites, and how do you see them play out in your own coaching style?
The ones that I have, the ones that I have, I think my individualization and learner always run rampant when I am face to face with an executive or with a manager. Again, every person has differences for me. Every person I'm eager to learn about. I'm eager to help. And I do this in a forecasting fashion as well because of my strategic. So strategic is about options, and it's about solutions as well for me. So configuring those to the specific needs of the leaders I work with is something for me which is first and foremost. So there is that level of intrigue, there is that level of wanting to learn, wanting to absorb, and we say that learning is a process theme rather than a destination theme. Coupling those together and really driving on on those in the way in which it fits with a map or a set of solutions for my clients is something which it really drives me. It gets me up and makes time go by very, very quickly.
And you are one of our course leaders for our accelerated strengths coaching courses in Asia as well as in Europe. What are your advice to people who are thinking about taking this course up? What benefits they can get out of it? Any thoughts that you have around that?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. So you're one of our course leaders in the region for our strengths courses. Any advice that you have for people who are thinking about taking these courses? What benefits they could get out of it, or just what are the learnings that they could get out of these courses?
Sure. I think there's several key benefits. I think the first one is that you're being exposed and you'll be absorbing a style of coaching which is really in huge demand across the world. Strengths-based coaching is something which it's emerging now as being one of the more required and desperately needed styles of coaching across the globe. So you're going to be exposed to that. You're going to be exposed as well to a particular framework which doesn't inhibit, it enables, and enables in such a way which is extremely unique for every single client that you're going to be touching. It's something that the uniqueness, I think, is not compartmentalizing certain people to certain letter codes or colors or behaviors, but it's one which is extremely expansive, and that's only the beginning of your understanding or of their understanding of what drives them. The rest is your coaching approach, and that's what will really help extrapolate that for each of these people. The other element is that you're going to be learning a lot from the other people that will be in that room. Every time we've run these sessions from London to the US, all over the world, you're exposed to a very diverse collective. People who have extremely strong executive experience. We had some CXOs in our session last week in Singapore, to those that have 20, 30 years of coaching experience. So you're going to be learning a lot from the people around you, in as much as you are from the facilitators. The final element is, I think, that you're going to be exposed to pretty much 45 or 40 plus years of Gallup's research around strengths, and what that entails is you're going to be exposed to the best tools and the most effective tools that Gallup's senior strengths coaches and the people that really put this together from a coaching perspective have been able to use most effectively around the world. And that's where you're going to get an advantage from all of these different factors, and it's going to put you in good stead in terms of the way in which you're going to expand and accelerate your coaching.
Thank you, Ehssan. For people who are interested to take up our strengths courses, you can log on to our website, www.gallupstrengthcenter.com, and look at all the courses that we have available around the world. Our next course in Singapore is scheduled from 3rd till the 6th of June. So feel free to drop me an email at saurav_atri@gallup.com to learn more about that, or just at coaching@gallup.com. Jim, over to you. Any final thoughts, questions around this?
No, none at this point, and I think with that we'll wrap it. We'll stay around for a few minutes after we're done here, just in case there's any other questions that come from the chat room. But I will remind folks to take full advantage of all the resources we have available. Sorry, I've just mentioned those at the Gallup Strengths Center. Again, that is just the Gallup Strengths Center. I'm sorry, it is just Gallup, not the. Don't put the in there. GallupStrengthsCenter.com, all one word, and send us your questions or comments. If you're watching the recorded version of this, send those to coaching@gallup.com. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this show, as well as all the past ones. We've got 20-some shows out there now, if you want to go back and view those. In fact, the last Southeast Asia edition that we did was very, very good. You'll want to go back and get that one as well. Those are all available at coaching.gallup.com. We're also looking for guest bloggers, and so if you got that writing itch and you are a strengths enthusiast or a coach that wants to write and get your article published, we are posting those to the Coacher's blog. If you're interested in submitting a post for consideration, you can contact us again, coaching@gallup.com, and put guest blogger in the subject line, so they'll route that, and I will get right back to you. Ehssan, thank you for taking some time today. It was great to have you on the show, and I'm a little jealous that you're in sunny Melbourne, and it's still not quite warm here in Nebraska. I know Singapore's probably got some fabulous weather, but thanks for taking a few minutes with us this morning to be a part of the program. I appreciate it.
Ehssan, thank you so much. It was, a privilege for us to, get hold of you. You're a really busy person traveling around the world, coaching senior executives. So thank you so much for taking time out to do this and let the coaches from worldwide who logged in live to learn from your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, coaches, for your attention and your ears.
Okay, with that break, that will end the recorded part of it. We're still live. I get this question all the time. This is out in chat, and so for folks who are listening, they said they took the Strengths Finder years ago. Would the results have changed over given or with life experiences? So, Jeremy, I hear Jeremy talk about this all the time, but maybe this is a good question to throw out to you guys. What's been the experience you see with people who might take it 2 or 3 or 4 years apart? Oh, who's going to take that one?
I'll have a go, but I think that question it comes up all the time. It comes up even in a coaching discussion. It comes up every time we run the accelerated strengths programs. The answer is not that simple, but it's also quite simple. It's the retest reliability of the tool is extremely high. It's at about a 0.74 to 0.78. That's the standard answer. Having said that, though, I think that some of the changes that we do see take place, and when I talk about changes, I mean big swings. So something moving from, let's say, your 29th theme up into your top 5 or top 10, the chances of that are very, very slow. Very, very slow. Now, you may have something move in if you take it 1 or 2 years later, 3 years later. You may have your 7th theme move up to your top 5. You may have something at number 4 move into number 6. These small movements are not that uncommon. But when you do get these big swings, you do get them. They're pretty much what causes them are huge shifts in your life. When we talk about huge shifts, we use and we've seen examples of, let's say, an illness in the family, or God forbid, a death in the family. Sometimes when you've had a huge career change, for instance, you've moved countries, you've had a child. You've become an empty nester. When you have these big swings in life, then we see that there's certain themes that start moving around. I worked with one executive who had a divorce and then retook the test. Some of her themes fell out of her top 5, and she had other ones creep up which weren't that prominent on her profile. So that's the long and short of it. You do get these changes, but there has to be some big shifts in your life. If all things are equal, and you do take the test, then you're not going to see much change. And that's what we've encountered across the globe.
Very good. You passed the test. The chat room, I have no more questions for you guys at this point. I do, if you were listening live and you're still hanging around, we do want to thank you. And we had quite a few viewers tonight watching us live. We want to thank you for coming out and being a part of Call to Coach. We have a whole YouTube page available for you as well, and I've dropped those links in the chat. They're also available. If you go to coaching.gallup.com, the link to all our video resources. Maybe you're not a reader, but maybe you're somebody who learns by viewing. We have a whole bunch of videos for you, including all the strengths vignettes. So if you go out there, they're little 2-minute summaries of all the strengths. If you want to see what they are, you could even build yourself a custom playlist based on those strengths themes that are out there. You could do that as well on our YouTube page. And again, those links are at coaching.gallup.com. With that, we'll end the live portion of the program this evening or this morning. Thanks for coming out, and we will be back with another. Actually, I should have highlighted this, Sarah, and I didn't, but a brand new theme Thursday that starts this week. Kurt Liesfeld, Jeremy Petrosini, and myself will kick off a 45-minute program where we dive into a single theme each and every week, every other week to start with for now. And we're going to start with, of course, Activator, because that's the right one you start with when you're starting something. And so we picked Activator, and Kurt and I will dive in. That's going to be Thursday, noon Central, 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Eastern. Here in the U.S., of course, we'll record all those things, so you have them available if you want to watch them in replay as well. So that's coming up. Again, all that stuff will come through our coaching site, coaching.gallup.com. Thanks for coming out, everybody.